Good afternoon. We are presently recording here in Jonsered, but we are situated very nice next to a very small lake here, and there are unusual birds landing and coming. It's a very pleasant 10th of the May, I think it is. And I would continue and hoping to make a segue into the Derrida article, session 4. But now it is Thomas J. McFarlane, Quantum Physics, Depth Psychology and Beyond. It's an introductory paper to his thinking. And I will continue where I left off at page 26. There will be a link in the description so you can download the pages and follow with me as I read. And we just took off. I'm going to continue where we took off last. We understood that the circle and the line are deeply connected, and that the linear line that is used, as Kalle said, in all academia today is a derivation from something more fundamental, more telling and more informing than the line, and that is the circle. All lines are mere shadows of the circles. They contain some of the information in the circle, but compared to the magnitude of the circle, they have an infinitesimal small amount of knowledge to carry. And we saw that the difference between the subject and the object is not a chiasm, a cleft. It is rather a continuum. And it's important to understand that what we see in the objective world is created by the subjective world. The way of knowing makes for either a gross world of impermanent objects fixated, or in the region going towards, I have to say, into the Lenin's gate, approaching the subject side, which has a subtler, finer quality to it, sharper. Here you find true intellectualism, intelligence, all those things that disappears in the modern world. And I continue the second paragraph on page 26 for you who follow. In addition, this shift in perspective, seeing the line plus point at infinity as being a circle, reveals as self-evident the teaching that the ultimate subject and the ultimate object are one. In particular, plus and minus infinity are clearly identified in this circular model for a point moving infinitely far to the right and a point moving infinitely far to the left correspond to points on the circle approaching the same point at the very bottom of the circle. This coincidence of opposites, as Cusack would call it, cannot be comprehended at the level of the line. Even deeper yet, we can recognize that the circle has perfect symmetry of all its points. There's no intrinsic difference between the points. No point is inherently privileged or distinguished. Consequently, we are free to select any point as the transcendent subject or point at infinity. While the linear mandala is fixed to a particular subjective point, the circular mandala invites free transformation. allowing any point on the circle to be regarded as the point from which the manifest world of objects is projected. So now we can see how subject and object can be absolutely different, but at the same time similar, simultaneous. The circle or the sphere is both explaining differ and difference to make the non-concept of the Derridian difference. From the perspective of the circle, it is evident that every point is potentially both a transcendent subject and a manifest object. Both emptiness and form or put another way, the transcendent subject is omnipresent and immanent in every object. Prior to the selection of a point at infinity, all points are equally subjective and objective, and I think the whole last 6 or 7 lines are absolutely quotable. This is a doorway of both having different subject and object living in the mundane world, but also see the sameness without losing anything. Moreover, any given point can simultaneously be a subject to which a particular manifest world appears. And an object within the manifest world appearing relative to another subjective point. But insofar as all the points of the circle are distinguishable, these subjects are identical. The circle is one continuous unity. They are of course not identical in the linear sense. This is an identity that also has absolute difference within it. The circle is one continuous unity. It is also a power bank. Harboring past and future, east, west, left, right. I would say it's the original chirality. The perspective of the circle reveals that the distinctions inherent in the linear mandala are artifacts of imaginative projection. Instead of a discontinuity between transcendent and manifest, there's continuity. Instead of the ultimate subject and ultimate object being infinite opposites, they are all identical in this broader sense. Rather than one point being privileged and fixed subject, all points are equally endowed with subjectivity. rather than the world of objects arising in relationship to one fixed subject, various worlds can arise in relation to various subjects and still make up an absolutely, from the perspective of the linear mandala, an objective world. And rather than points being inherently subjective or objective, all are potentially both. As the Buddhist might say, from the perspective of the ultimate truth, everything has one taste. That one. Beyond inner and outer, subtle and gross, the correspondence between the line and the circle maps the negative valued points on the left side of the line to the left half of the circle, and maps the positive valued points on the right side on the line to the right half of the circle. I will jump a bit here because this needs a whiteboard to be fully understandable. I will just mention the interior-exterior distinction can be upheld, although at the same time showing an ulterior, ultimate sameness. This reflection symmetry thus illustrates the principle that every objective level of being requires a corresponding subjective level of knowledge in order to know it. Once more we have Plotinus. For an integral science, I'm now going to the end of the article, to incorporate all levels means that it employs not only the physical organs of sensory knowledge. But also the conceptual and higher levels of knowing as well. When applied to the physical domain, science requires use of our sensory modes of knowledge to access data about physical objects. In addition, science is not mere observation. It necessarily involves abstract, conceptual representation when formulating theories and deriving consequence from them. And insofar as integral science takes subtle objects as its domain of study, such as in sacred sciences, it will also require the exercise of subtle organs of knowledge. An integral science, however, does not simply mean that these aspects are included. It means that they are integrated and seen as interdependent and ultimately inseparable. The symmetry of the integral sphere illustrates this truth in a way that no planar model can do. And this is important because it shows that there is quite a new thing entering. A new way of expanding thinking, I would say, without changing it at the core. For example, the fact that all data is theory-laden illustrates the implicit dependence on sensory knowledge on theoretical knowledge. All our scientific knowledge implicitly involves conceptual knowledge. Even at the level of the raw facts. Similarly, conceptual knowledge and sensory knowledge both implicitly presuppose the primordial capacity to be aware. these subtle interdependencies between the levels are easy to overlook in the static planar model. The dominant model. Moreover, the reflection symmetries of the spherical mandala help us remember that the deepening of our knowledge of nature is not a simple matter of simply looking, but a process of interactive dialogue with nature in which we pose questions in the form of controlled experiment, receive responses in the form of data, attempt to understand what we are being told through a process of interpretation using theories. Then pose new questions to refine our understanding. I would compare it a little bit to the Jacques Derrida text. I don't think there is enough time in this specific episode to go into any depth.
Pause, perhaps.
And one of the articles we are pondering about now is this very interesting by Jacques Derrida, The Logic of the Supplement. And it's here pointing to a very important thing. The absolute division between life and death often makes for I would say a chiasm that cannot be overturned. And I think most people are struggling with that, how to handle life and death, as is suggested here in this article. Our inability to bring both is coming from the planar mode. I am 100% sure the circular reasoning can bring in both, to see them as the opposites that we already perceive them in the linear mode, but also that they are the same. Without this understanding, both death and life will be weakened. Everything is coming originally from the sphere. As McFarlane was pointing out, the modern way of reasoning with linearity makes understanding of bothness an impossibility. Derrida is trying to bring in both, but he cannot succeed without the sphere. It's absolutely impossible. It will remain to be either or, even if you remove the slash or prefer an and. You need to spatially and temporally get into your system how they can be both. It needs to be understood in an embodied, physical way for it to become more than words. I'm pretty sure, and I think I thought for decades now, that Jacques Derrida has a very acutely clear intuition about these things. And I think he is already living in the circular world, and we only see his expressions of this deeper embodied understanding. It cannot be abstract or only written. Especially last night when I read McFarlane, I came to understanding what is text. It is encompassing both subject and object. And until recently, those were just mere words, almost empty words. But now I came to a deepening understanding that was embodied. It was true. There is a pointer here in page 112 or 17. I'm not sure here. There's two, page number 79.
Yes,
here.
one is passed to the French edition.
And this one is the English.
I think it's the French.
Well, 79 in the English edition. And it's a comment on Jacob. It is not only an extension or a deepening of our knowledge, but a structural transformation of knowledge itself. And listen now, a new way of considering objects. It's exactly the terms as McFarlane has. And I could not understand it the first time we had it in 1540, 1541. It cannot be explained anything less that you actually see the sphere. It's absolutely impossible. So it's structurally a new mode of understanding. And this is this deepening, broadening of understanding I'm after here. I will continue a bit later here. I'm off to eat. Say thank you very much for your patience. Maybe you have a question? I forgot here. You was rushing for food here. But we need to change quickly. Yes, hurry up. Come. I need to hold the falls over.
Let me take up the normally pejorative term circular reasoning. Here, thanks to Thomas McFarlane, thank you, and Derrida, and you, Hans, we could turn into something positive. And this is an example of every language where Newton has taken over. Because in Newton's world, I believe, the circle is something almost negative. It's outside of his system. While you have only lines, straight lines have the precedence in Newton's system. Therefore, circular reasoning in every language is something negative. But we could see it something positive, and we should take it something positive, because the straight line is derived from the circle, as we learned from Thomas McFarlane. pardon me, Thomas McFarlane. So everything is easy to think like I'm here, I'm living, and you have this over there, say, to see it as in a circular, like a linear over there, but it's easier to see it. It's already, I'm already within the circle of life and death. And in the very moment that I'm born, I'm already dying, as Heidegger says, actually. So we need to come away from linear reasoning and come into circular reasoning in a positive sense. That was my humble take on this.
Yeah. Comment on the comment?
Yes, perhaps if you want.
Yeah, since the default mode of understanding is the linear one, and this is something McKilkes took up, there is nobody who has any access to circular. We are unable to understand circularity without extensive training. And one of my favorite philosophers, well, philosophers I have to say, Derrida and Heidegger, I think they have that intuition by themselves, but they never give the gift of circularity, which is the needed addendum to make the understanding embodied.
But we can take it for Nikos Okusa.
Well, we have the explanation here. It needs to be
Explained.
well written, drawn. It needs to be physical things. So it gets into, we have a physical mode of understanding, and that understanding is always planar, always linear. There's no exception. I never met any exception within academia. And I think that is one of the things that needs to be added to understand circularity and how that brings understanding to these philosophers. Because there is no other way to see that subject and object are absolutely different and at the same time very, very identical. Taking in both difference, asymmetry, and all those other traits, it needs to be seen, I think even touched. And I think we went into this with the Klein bottle, but this is an expansion. Well, I'm really happy about McFarlane as well, and I'll say thank you very much and have a very pleasant afternoon. Well, it's almost 2 o'clock. Bye bye.